Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Event Trends in a Post-COVID Asia. Joining us in today's event is CEO of EventX, Wong, Iain Bell, Head of Events at Haymarket Media Group, Darren Chakri, Founder of HK Initiative, Sandy Ip, Partnerships and Event Manager at Tencent WeStart, and Wee-Tech Chan, Vice President of Pico. All speakers boast a broad range of experience and knowledge, and at the end of the webinar, you're free to browse around their exhibition booths and network with other attendees. So kicking things off, we will start with Event Trends in the Post-COVID Asia, hosted by Wong of EventX. Sam's been working in the event industry for 7 years now and is a speaker at the Global Exhibition Day. EventX has organized over 5,000 events and has had 5 million attendees in total. And over the last 6 months, EventX has hosted over 200 virtual and hybrid events successfully. So Sam will be sharing with you all of the insights that he's learned and what his predictions are for the next few months. So let's get this underway now, and let me introduce you to our first speaker, Wong.
Hello, everyone. So welcome for joining this event. So it's really our honor to share this insight, and also we have a really fantastic speaker panel today, sharing all the trend in post-COVID. And so I think some of you actually, it's like really exciting to see actually more than hundreds of people actually joining. So today we have a lot of professionals from event and also marketing industry that joining us today. And the purpose of the whole event today is to pick some top of the mind from the speaker actually from different part of the world. And so the first sections that I will be sharing is mainly about the trend that we have done some research with around hundreds of event professionals and also event organizers in Asia. And we have done some survey. And so we want to share with you some of the insight that we have got. And so let me share the PowerPoint that we have. And so this is actually, I'll give you, before actually I share the result, maybe we share a little bit our background, what EventX is doing. So most of you, I guess you have already experienced our product based on the webinar today, that you went to the lobby, you come in the webinar section today. And so EventX, basically we are providing the whole all-in-one event management platform, including offline and online. So you all got to experience today. And we are trying to collect like all the insight from all the events that we have run. So far, we have run more than 5,000 events. Smaller one is like around a few hundred people, but the bigger one is actually up to 200,000 people. So in 102 cities. And so far, we have served more than 5 million attendees. And we want to collect all these best practices from our clients, our users, and so that today to share a little bit how they're doing it. And this is some of the portfolio that of our clients. They are from all different industry, but today we're not too focused on one individual one of them, but we want to extract how they're doing it so that to share with you. And in our whole product, actually, we cover most of the stage of the events. From pre-event, like registration, ticketing, like how you get in the event today. From like for physical event, you have the check-in process, and even like lead capturing when you attend the event. And also, of course, like for virtual events, you can experience the whole platform by yourself in the event today. So I'm not going to go through too many of them. But this is some example of like Apple that we have done their physical events, Microsoft their virtual events, and even like exhibition. This is for a Japanese company called Jackcho. So immediately I want to jump into the trend for post-COVID, like what's the virtual or hybrid trend. So we have seen some of the pattern and we want to share with you. The first one, actually very quickly, I jump into some statistics for all of you is we collect this is a statistic from EventMP. So they did 2 surveys. One survey is done in June last year, so which is around almost like a year ago. And so June, when they asked what would your events look like, or when the country or the city is going back to business. So most of the people in June, they were hoping that actually they will downsize their events and move it to smaller, shorter period of time, more local. But actually when they did the same survey in November, you can see the dark blue one. So most of the people actually moved to virtual and hybrid is the new trend. So that means actually a lot of people are rethinking after the COVID. They rethink of how they run the events, and that's what we have. And the second part is around 70% of the event organizers said they will do hybrid as a meeting. So that's actually a big, actually it's a big one on the new trend. A lot of people actually people mention they will actually try to run a hybrid event, and later actually in the panel you will also have a chance to listen to the speaker. They mentioned how actually they run the hybrid event, what does it mean as a hybrid event. So a quick polling I would like to also engage every one of you who are actually in the room right now is from your opinion. So I know like we have a very diverse background audience today. So from your point of view, which type of event will come back first? They will emerge first after the pandemic. So the corporate event or exhibitions or conference, sport events or music festivals or trade shows. So actually we cast a vote right now, so everyone can actually participate. And from your point of view, we also want to collect all this information so that we will share this survey post event so that you guys can have a quick understanding on how the other market is like looking like and how do they feel about the market. So we can actually do the quick polling right now, and which type of event actually will come back first. So exhibition, trade shows, or corporate events, or music festivals. So I think like people can vote right now. So okay, let's end the polling and see what's the result. All right, so I think almost like majority, like 51% actually say corporate event actually will come back the fastest. And the second is about exhibition, very neck to neck. It's like neck to neck to the sport and festival. But trade show will be the last one to come back. I guess actually that's also kind of synchronized with what we have seen, because trade show usually involve a lot of countries. That means you have like a lot of international audience that will join in, and so we think that trade show will be the kind of the last one that come back. And I think the audience actually think that the corporate event will be the fastest, because most of the corporate event will be a little bit more local, and that's actually interesting to know how you guys think. And let's move on to the next one. And actually, this is a survey done by one of the comment done by the BCD Travel Asia. So they mentioned that actually they see a lot of domestic business travel in China already coming back. Especially, they predict that it will be in Q3 2021. The business travel, especially domestic one, will come back, and they foresee actually the domestic travel for countries like China, Thailand, and Vietnam. Those places that the COVID cases is under control, those travel will be actually coming back sooner. So the next one actually we want to actually engage the whole audience today is for the percentage of events, how would you think about post-COVID? So will you turn them into virtual or hybrids after the pandemic? So like 20%, under 20%, or it will be 20, 50, 57 to 75, or actually 75 to 100%. So let's see how the audience would do it. And the question could be very interesting, because last time we did a little bit similar survey, and we asked how do they run events, and actually most of the audience, around 86% would say hybrid event is the new way that they will run the events. So here, let's see how would this time, how much audience will actually plan for virtual and hybrid. So let's see the results. So we have majority actually will be around 50 to 70% of your event will be virtual or hybrid. So actually still a very high portion of it. And the second highest is actually 20 to 50, so around 38%. So together, actually, I would say we already have close to 70, actually 70 to 80% there. And around 7% say it will be 0 to 20%. That means actually close to 90. Yeah, 90 something will actually move almost like virtual and hybrid. So that's actually even higher than last time. Last time when we asked these questions, around 86% will actually do something like virtual or hybrid. Actually, hybrid is the highest voting. And I think right now, actually, we have close to almost like 90% actually will explore virtual and hybrid. So that's actually pretty interesting to know. And I give you one example on how one of the organization really successfully transformed into virtual events. So there's a business speaker or I would say business guru or strategist called Tony Robbins. He's like a very famous business coach from the States. And he used to run physical event like on the left. And give you a very rough statistic that they used to sell around like $5,000 per ticket. And the biggest event they have done is around like 3,000, a little bit close to that range. For that same event, they have different series of events. And the tickets is around 5,000. So on the right, you can see the virtual event, they sell similar price because you have like family can join, your friends can join together. And they actually selling almost double, and it's the largest ever in the 30 years history running that event. And in terms of income, there's an estimation that they actually, because of the profit of the, I mean, the cost is actually lower. So you spend less on food, the venue, the people managing it. And so they actually can estimate that the profit is actually double in the virtual event space. And it will be interesting to know, actually, this is the real studio that they built. And they have built a hybrid studio. It took them around, if I remember correctly, actually they spent around $14 million, $14 million to build this studio. And so they have the virtual 360 in front of them, and then they at the back actually they also have some private seat, close to 1,000 people that can attend physically there. And so that's actually one of the investment we see. Actually, he transformed the whole business very successfully, but there's some hiccups. So he mentioned that actually the first studio that he built, it took around $7 to $9 million. And for the first iteration, so that's the you see actually what he built. He have the first version, and then now it's already the third version of it. So but after that, actually he had done the, as I estimate, he had done the biggest event ever, most successful event ever, and with the biggest penetration because of the virtual, and everybody can attend from everywhere in the world. So I think that's one of the benefit of virtual events. So for the audience, I think that's also a factor that when you consider about the cost of no matter virtual or hybrid events platform. So what actually will be your deciding factor? So what would be that is actually important to you? So it could be price, it could be technical features, localizations, and familiarity. That means like whether you tried before. So let's see how our audience today. So it's actually very meaningful because we have a lot of audience actually in the event industry. So after this event, if you want to download all this like polling results and for your own internal use, you can also use that. So let's show the result and see what's the determining factor for the audience. Okay, let's show the result. So I think the highest actually here I saw is 54% vote for technical features. So that means like whether they can provide specific features like very important. And the second is the price. So around 23% actually is on the price. And familiarity, that means like whether you have used it before, is actually the third factors. And that's actually pretty interesting that a lot of feature seems to be very important. So maybe in later stage we can ask the panel and see what kind of feature or what kind of interaction that they're looking for in the virtual events. And I want to share with you one example that how people are starting to run virtual events. So actually UST is like a school in Hong Kong. It's a university. So they have around like 5,000 visitors for the information day. So they actually host their information day in a virtual event format. And one interesting thing that they did to increase their engagement like in the virtual world is to gamify the events. So we provide one thing as called kind of like treasure hunt. And so they actually using treasure hunt to put this logo into different places in the virtual event. And after you collect 10 of them, you will get a prize. So there's a lot of way you can gamify your event. And so so when you consider one of the actually in the last polling, people said like the technical feature is like important. So that's actually one of the things that you might consider, which is gamification. And so when we work with them, so they want actually people to walk into different spaces, not just the webinar. They want them to go to the booth, go to the school, talk to the representative. So they place it in different places and to encourage people to browse more. That's one of the, I think, actually pretty successful case that they did, that they encourage a lot of people to browse around. And the second one is Cloud Expo. I think they have done virtual events around close to 1 year ago. And so how they did it is they have like 10,000 more visitors for the exhibitions, and they have a very smart way to improve the engagement, which is they use a lot of coupon and gift as one product page, and so they have a lot of offer for the audience. So and secondly, they actually have a lot of engagement, no matter on social media, also on tracking. So you can see that actually they give out like $10,000 for 3 things that you have done that you need to do it together at the events. First is you need to tag people in social media, and then the second is you need to attend minimum at 2 conference sections, and a third one is they need you to at least visit one of the booths. So because at the back end we allow them to track the audience footprint. So where did they go, how many places did they go, and things like that. So after they track that, they very smartly use a price so that to reward those people who are actually get engaged. So at least they will do 3 things and in the event. So that's a very smart move. And they also like keep engaging the audience and potential attendee before the event. So this is some posts that they did on their social media like LinkedIn, and so we capture it so that for a reference, like maybe every 2 days they will post some tips about how do you attend the event, like you mute your phone, turn off your email, and which browser you should use, and also where's the program, and also like where you can find the things that you want to find. And so they keep engaging their audience like before the event. So I think that's actually also a good best practice that we will recommend. And one more thing, actually, a lot of I would say like hybrid event right now have changed the way how they run it is by not just having the live version, but they also have the on-demand versions. That means like today. So after we run this event, so we can actually turn this into a video format that people can revisit the video content that we have today, and as a post-event, I would say long tail effects that you can create for your event. So around 95.5% actually people believe that on-demand is actually helpful, and around 80% of them think it's actually reaching to a wider audience. For us is a real example. So last time when we did the event trend in Asia, there's around like 33 country attendees. So that means like they are from everywhere, no matter on Asia. Actually, it's like everywhere. So they actually joined the virtual event from different parts of the world. So in the past, when we do physical event, then it's actually very limited, so people won't fly there. And today we have a speaker actually joining in from Singapore. So virtual event actually make it simpler for audience like that. And from now on, actually, to be frank, for us, we actually will be ourselves. We will invest probably like 80% of the event will be on virtual, and 20% will be on physical. Because like virtual, we can invite speaker from all around the world, and we have had audience from all around the world. We can serve more people, and for the same content, but we can actually help more people to get the knowledge. And so we find it much more powerful than the physical event that we have done. So that's actually from our personal experience. And I think that's for go back to the audience is So the question for you guys today is, so during the last few months, have you noticed any shift? And for you, actually, is that the same, that the diversity of the attendee, is it from more countries like what we experience, or actually it's more a closer group? So for you, do you have a more diverse background or diverse audience for your events? So there's like few choices here, much more diverse, just like no notable shift, or actually less diverse, or less audience. So let's give probably like maybe 5 seconds for the audience to vote. And during this like time, so for us actually, I will share, we experience a much bigger audience and much diverse background. So we have actually last time we have people joining from Japan, Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, even Thailand. Some country actually I never visited before. Some of them are from like Pakistan, and so it's like pretty amazing group. So let's see the result and see how the audience is feeling. So I think around 55% is more diverse, and much more diverse is 19%. So I think we will be fall into the much more diverse category, and no notable shift is around 20%. So most of it actually, close to 70% of you experience actually more diverse background from the audience for your events. So that's actually interesting to know. And so last is about like some of the other company, how they are running events. So so this is more a trade show example. So they for Reed Exhibition, they are one of the largest in Japan. That they run trade shows that basically in different industry like food, IT, home gift, and all this area. And so one thing that actually they utilize a lot is business matching. So that's actually it works pretty well in virtual world. So when we work with them, so because they have so many, I think a few hundred to sometimes thousand exhibitors, and maybe thousands to tens of thousands audience. So because they need to match the audience with the buyer and seller, and so they allow them to have a platform. They book each other's time slot, and so they can pick the date, they can pick a time, and actually they have a hybrid element. So all the event that you just saw here is actually hybrid. So they have physical show and they have online. And how they did it is like when they do the business matching. So they did two things. One is they allow you to choose whether you want to meet physical or virtual. So I can pick a date, which is like, let's say today, 12 o'clock. And then I can pick whether I meet you physically on the spot or I meet you online, which is during video call. So they actually have a capability, let the business matching happen online. But you can also meet the person physically. So that's one of the example how they run the hybrid events. And PwC, it's actually pretty interesting that they are using it for kind of like hiring and HR purpose. So they have an exhibition, which is a career fair. So they allow the people, like the registration form, when you register on the registration form, they allow people to upload their CV. And actually during the if you go back to the virtual platform right now, you can also send the name card to each other. And they allow the candidate to send CV to also to the maybe the company or to the department that they want to apply. So this is like, for example, assurance departments, then you can send your CV to them, and then immediately you can do a video call as a kind of interview. So you can collect all the attendee documents at the same time. And that's like one of the example we see the shift, not just event or marketing industry, like somehow the HR and hiring is also shifting to virtual. And one last example I want to give you is on the live streaming. So Tesla and NIO. So Tesla definitely, like everybody knows, is an electric car company, and NIO is a competitor actually of Tesla that they do electric car in China. And so both of them actually leveraging live streaming to boost their sales and during the pandemic. And how they did it is actually at Tesla, they just like do a live streaming show. And it was around like, they book around 2,500 test drive in just one live streaming event. that's actually more than like almost like close to weeks or to months test drive for them. And you can see that they are just like doing live streaming, and then people actually immediately book the could be the test drive on in Shanghai. And Neo, which is their competitor, actually even generates sales, around $18 million sales from the live streaming. So they actually, this is how they did it. They this is the founder of the Neo, and they invite like could be celebrities, could be like real user, and they do live streaming immediately to boost the awareness and also sales, and they really make sales. So that's actually the world is shifting, and why I'm giving all this example is today, although we are talking about events, but actually not just the event industry, but a lot of like even sales, HR industry is shifting to leveraging new technology like live streaming, and also could be on hiring. So we see this trend in a lot of our users, our customers, or other platform that people are leveraging. So we want to share some of the trend to you so that you know. I want to advocate so that you know actually that's how some of the industry is using it, and you can also think about how you can use it in your industry. So I think I would conclude it here that on the top left you can see that's how we used to run events. Some of the event will still stay in physical like that, but new technology like live streaming, video conferencing, like what Tony Robbins is doing for the whole virtual event, that's a real event, so it's not a fake photo. And so that is like could be very smooth, and it's exactly how we are running event with all of the audience today right now. And in the future, you can see VR and some new technology will be applied to the event industry. So I hope this will give you a very high level glimpse of how the event or marketing industry will head in, and how the technology will collide with this industry. And I hope it gives you some insight on where to move to the next strategy. And later we actually have a lot more really exciting speaker that they will share with you some of the trend that they see from the other side. We are sharing it from the technology side, and they are on the execution, on the branding side, and I really look forward to their sharing also. So thank you all for joining today. And so the next speaker, I will let the MC to introduce him.
Awesome. That was really interesting, Sam. Thank you. In the second part of our webinar, our guest speaker, Iain Bell, will give us his appraisal of the event industry before, during, and after the pandemic. So Iain is the head of events programming for Haymarket Media Group and has considerable experience in moderating and hosting finance-related events. Before Haymarket, he worked at The Economist as a senior program editor, writing content for events on a wide array of issues, from climate change to fintech and cardiovascular health to technological innovation. He has an undergraduate degree in ancient history from the University of Nottingham and a postgraduate degree in management from Warwick Business School. So over to you, Iain.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Car. I would actually disagree with the audience on the first poll, as I think that sports events and music festivals will come back first, actually. But my name is Iain Bell. I look after the events for Haymarket's 4 brands in Asia. They are Campaign Asia, Finance Asia, Asian Investor, and Corporate Treasurer. Before that, I was a senior program editor at The Economist newspaper, always based in Hong Kong. I've always been involved with writing and producing events, so very much a content background. And I've been in the industry for about 7 years now. And it was always really similar up until March. Content changes, sure. The format broadly stays the same. Sales pitches a little bit more sophisticated, but broadly the same. Venues the same. Technological advancements a little bit here and there, but broadly the same. And then everything changed when the pandemic broke last February in Asia and around the world in March. And today, what I'm going to share with you are my thoughts on the future of the corporate events industry. I need to clarify first that these are not my opinions and aren't reflective of Haymarket or any other firm. And one thing to note, actually, based on Sum's presentation there, is that none of my events are consumer driven. They're not trade shows either. I'll touch on them, but they're not trade shows. They're not marketing events. They're not sports or musical festivals. They are corporate B2B content driven events which range from the sub 100 to the small 1000s in attendance. So bear in mind that my comments today have been framed by that context. I do think it's extremely important to understand, if we are going to understand what will change when we finally emerge from a COVID-ridden world. We must go back a little bit further to understand where the events industry was before the lockdowns and the travel bans and the closures of venues and the mass testings and the absence of any form of human-to-human contact, save from with our partners or our friends or our children. And if we're really honest with ourselves, I'm sure the corporate events attendees in the audience may disagree with this, but if we're really honest with ourselves, I think the events industry was struggling before COVID-19 ravaged the world. Save from a few major and innovative and rapid growing and everyone paying events that were sort of created by industry insiders and ones which grew phenomenally quickly. Fresh ideas were pretty hard to come by. Trade shows, presumably the hardest hit by the pandemic. The established ones had relied on the calendar event factor for business to be done and had done for some time. The hard work for building these major events had often already been done. Speakers were a little bit repetitive, content a little bit unimaginative, but the risk was small. And that's why you were able to repeat the same event every year, essentially. As long as new business could come in from firms who could be convinced that ROI existed, everything was fine. Smaller, more content-driven events like the ones I helped create were similarly at crossroads. Fresh ideas and formats were often constrained by budgeting issues. Revenue for some time, it seemed, had become harder and harder to find. The industry-wide inertia was looming, and it was very difficult to uproot. And then the pandemic hit. And again, if we're honest with ourselves, there was probably a little tiny bit of relief that we could postpone events from June, and then again, when June came by, to September. The hard work could be done in the meantime, and we could make much better events with that extra lead time, that very precious concept that we never seem to ever have enough of. But when we realized in June that September wasn't going to work, that inertia really changed to fear. The pandemic really shook the industry into being scared. Fear of salary cuts, fear for jobs, fear even of office closures, all of which has come true to a varying degree for many organizations whose revenue was majorly sourced from live events. So we all started testing virtual events. The first real challenge there was to convince clients of their merit. Some clients were keen, others weren't initially at all. And the cynic in me would say that virtual offerings really became successful because clients had money to spend on marketing that they would lose if they didn't spend it. Certainly that was the case at the beginning, and I don't think it warranted this sort of industry pat on the back that we've all seen on our LinkedIn feeds. Yet clients started to get more comfortable with sponsoring virtual events, and the grind, the daily grind for event organizers came back, and we were all delighted that it was back. And they really started to work. It became clear to me, I can't remember the exact time, but it became clear to me that there are many aspects of virtual events that make them preferable to their physical cousins. Number one, margins are much higher. Number two, the risks of launching a successful event, which we believe has longevity, and we always do, is much lower, given the lower costs involved and the potential of editorial repurposing of content should they not work. And number three, global speakers are undoubtedly easier to confirm, as some has already said. And number four, actually, audiences are larger and more geographically diverse. Undoubtedly true. I was actually really surprised to see how low they're scored in the polls. So portfolios of virtual events were created, and that is where we find ourselves now. And once we all learned how to host successful virtual events, mass vaccines are suddenly in play and change is again on the horizon. Hope for normality in society and in our personal lives has returned, but clients are now unsure again where to allocate their spend again. Keep on with virtual or wait until physical events are back. As an event producer, this is arguably quite frustrating, actually. I could easily make the argument that I would never want physical events to come back. Our audience is small, focused, and senior. From a financial perspective, at least, virtual events are pretty solid. But as events professionals, we do not get to decide the future. We must follow the whims of our clients and of our audiences. The question is, what is the future for corporate events for them and not for us? Each audience and each client are different, so we cannot really give a definitive answer to that question. What is the norm in some markets, in some industries around which virtual events or physical events anchor themselves? Some cultures are rarely the same. But we can still explore three scenarios, I would say, based on data and assumptions that will help us to determine the likelihood of what's happening in the future. These scenarios are binary, but they will give us the perspective to strategize prudently. Number one, there is a dramatic reduction in physical events. So event providers like EventX are building new businesses in facilitating customer engagement. Before the pandemic, we relied entirely on face-to-face introductions, at least at events. It would have been considered strange to tour around an exhibition hall in a virtual setting. No one would have done it. Time will tell whether virtual meetings can have the same effect as physical ones, but what is certainly true is that clients of events looking to push their message to their customer base can now track the engagement levels and the reach of their engagement in a much more clinical way than in the past. And the data supports this. According to Gartner, a research and advisory firm, 80% of B2B sales interactions between suppliers and buyers are expected to occur in digital channels by 2025. It's not that far off. With that in mind, how could I challenge the perception that there will be a reduction in physical events? And how could I challenge the fact that industry events might go the same way as cold calling or cold emailing? And what's more, the markets seem to, in part at least, endorse this. There are a number of IPOs happening in the pipeline, in the global pipeline, which do indicate a genuine step change is taking place if we look at the flow of capital in the sector, and that we must do. Their arguments to move away permanently from live events are as follows. Number one, live events have limited engagement with regional or global audiences. Number two, live events lack effective insights into converting prospects into leads. And number three, live events are unable to offer behavioral insights to personalized follow-up. Are these true? They probably are true. Are they solved by virtual events? Doubtfully. For these reasons. One, this is from my perspective as a corporate events producer, but we can try as hard as we like to engage our audience through virtual events, but we can never know how fully engaged they are. Feedbacks are rarely filled out, in any event format. Number two, a number of our clients have not got better leads from virtual events. Some have, sure, but some haven't. from virtual events over their physical counterparts. It's a colder approach to email someone you've never met on the back of their attendance at a virtual event. Pretty much end of story. And number 3, personalized follow-up is pointless if the recipient doesn't know who the salesperson is, and it's made even harder if you are competing with 20 sponsors, for instance. So for these reasons, a virtual-only model won't happen, or a mainly virtual model won't happen. The clients, in my perspective, don't want it. The audience of our readers don't want it. And as much as there is a financial argument from the likes of me to keep them going, we must follow our clients and our audience, not our own opinions. That's the first scenario. Number 2 is that virtual events disappear. There's talk of a roaring 20s, a rebound of social interaction not seen before since the 1920s, when the world recovered from the Spanish flu. A world, therefore, where people will be comfortable to fly for business again. Why then would anyone want to dial into a virtual event? In this scenario, if you imagine the strength of this rebound, there would be physical events going on in every market and every geography and every industry in the world because of thirst for human contact. Clients have told us that they are looking forward, they're desperate for physical events to come back. I cannot argue with that, and it should be taken seriously by the industry, even if that industry is hopeful that their new offerings will be enough to sustain their businesses. Trade shows in this regard rebound. I've not seen any evidence that people genuinely prefer a virtual trade show and a virtual exhibition hall over a physical one. In this scenario, the new industry that virtual events provide, they need to seriously consider how they add value to the sector where B2B is the driving force in accordance to this changing customer demands. So number 3, and that's the hybrid model. So the bigger question for me and for everybody else who look at virtual events from the corporate perspective is it natural for human beings and business people to want to meet only over Zoom? The answer is no. But if technology can help expand our reach virtually, then why not? So what does a hybrid model actually look like? My 2 cents are, by the way, that the hybrid model should have been in place before the pandemic, but it's extremely easy for me to say that with hindsight. But the hybrid model, the one of the future, in post-COVID, will be a feature in the vast majority of events around the world, but not perhaps, in my opinion, at least, to the same degree as people think. In my opinion, the platform costs will be cheap. No one but the very biggest spenders will pay big bucks for top venues and flashy virtual platforms. I think also to touch on the major changes that will occur from the perspective of trade publications like the ones I work for, and the major players second. So the market changes that's coming for trade publications is that we will scale back on our virtual spend. We will use low-cost providers for our virtual registration system, which can pair with Zoom or something else like its equivalent, because that's all we need. That and a solid speaker lineup from people overseas who we've identified as global leaders in the field, dipping in and out of the discussions. But we already do that. Admittedly, we will probably be running 1 or 2 major flagship virtual events only a year to keep our global presence growing, to get the people we cannot get to speak at physical events and build those relations and relationships that might turn good in a few years' time. The major players will still want to create an enticing virtual offering, but it won't be the same as now. It won't build on a model that has been picked up by trade shows now. It doesn't need to be the same. It'll likely be a catalog of on-demand content nullifying the need for an online exhibition because they will have that in person already. I say this because it's incredibly important that we all look at the benefit of, or the benefit to, an event organizer's audience and client base in a world where we presume international travel is resumed. As we all hope and expect it will be soon. I mean, country events, no need for virtual offerings. Sponsors want to fly in and meet with buy-side people of a given country. That's why they back these events. Regional and thematic events, yes, but let's get those who can't fly to listen in and to speak. Do we need to do that live? Not necessarily, but if we do, that's fine, stream it. But neither of those things are of high cost. Global hub events, the real senior audience who attend calendar events are only there to meet people. Yes, we'll amplify the content around the world, but that's cheap. Trade shows, on the assumption that international travel is back, then boom, back in business. Do they need a virtual exhibition room in a virtual hotel lobby? I'm not sure. What I do find extremely interesting is how fast firms like EventX were and how innovative they were in developing a very much needed platform in record time. And judging by some global IPO prospectuses that I've read, made a lot more money than what they were doing before. But what's more fascinating is how I'm going to enjoy seeing whether they ensure value is added to event organizers in the corporate space in the future and how they do that and how they keep doing it. So my time, I think, is almost up. So I'm going to conclude now with maybe 4 recommendations that have come from the industry's past, present, and future that I think will decide its success and the success of every party in the industry in the near term. Number 1, a culture of inertia and comfort destroys businesses. A load of industry players have suffered tremendously through this, and the market has consolidated significantly. The change on the horizon will make that happen again, I'm sure of it. To those organizers which have been successful and to those firms which have been successful, regardless of your involvement in the events industry, keep doing what you were doing. Audience or customer focused, benefit driven events. The marketplace is smaller now, and it has shown the industry what quality really looks like. Keep moving fast. Speed is going to be everything. No one can afford to react slowly to the upcoming changes. Number 2, the marketplace will be different from what you hope. Whether you are a virtual event provider, an event organizer, a venue, or whatever, the market is going to change, not always in the ways that you want. And it will be a very uncomfortable year. Not necessarily financially, but psychologically, I think we're in for a tough ride where our risks might not work, where there's no real smooth sailing, not for a while at least, just more uncertainty. So in whatever you do, define how you add value to your clients and audience. Suppress the stress and keep calm and act. Number 3, the value proposition of events companies has changed. Content producers or content first event producers know that in order to attract an audience, they need better speakers than their competitors, a better program than their competitors, a better database than their competitors, a better way of connecting with their audience than their competitors. And these always have been the core principles of any content-driven events business, but they have been magnified in this pandemic. Everything else can be cut. We've proved that. Bells and whistles, not always necessary when you have what I've just mentioned. We're a much leaner industry now. We've had to be, and service providers and stakeholders need to understand that. Number 4, don't, and this is the final one, don't make assumptions based on your own past experience, your own proficiency to react to change, or the opinions of others. Anything that can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. You don't know. You don't know where your clients are going to take you. Your business models will change. Again, the change coming now will likely be harder than the pandemic. And that is terrifying, quite frankly. And you have to be, in order to survive and succeed, led by your audience and clients. Let them drive you, as you should have always done, but we haven't always done that, and act as nimbly and as ferociously as you did when the pandemic disrupted everything, and you'll be absolutely fine. And that's all I really wanted to say. And I thank you very much indeed for your time. I do think that I have time for a few questions, assuming there are some. I saw a few come in. But if not, I hope you enjoyed my little talk. And thank you again to EventX for inviting me today. I think these types of events are extremely important to share our fears, but also our hopes and our strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Iain. It's a very informative and actually really analytical view. And thank you again for your sharing. And I also put down quite some notes here. And actually, you're having a lot of questions to answer. Actually, not more than 4. So I will pass it on to Ka for the question and Q&A sections.
Definitely, and that was really insightful. So if you want to ask a couple of questions, just raise your hand in the Q&A section. Otherwise, I've been going through the chat and I've seen quite a lot of questions. So I'm going to pick one at random. The first one is from Michael Dacey. He says, with the proliferation of online events, we are seeing a drop in standard. Does this make it harder to keep rate cards healthy? And do you think there's a webinar fatigue setting in?
I actually love the drop in standard. I love it because it gives quality event producers the opportunity to show how much better they are than their competitors, and therefore the rate card is completely justified. I think that people were really fast to lower their prices, and I think that's made them suffer a little bit because the clients were asking them, everybody else is. But the trick there was to keep the quality high so that you didn't need to do that, and you're yielding results now because the margins are so low.
Perfect. The second question is from Alan Toe. So he asks, in a B2B conference, what's your advice to engage with clients who attend the conference virtually?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that there has to be a little bit more flexibility in terms of not necessarily profiling sponsor speakers, but giving them space on the agenda that they're able to get their message across. It's crucial to speak to them beforehand. So in the lead up to the event, you must speak to your sponsor speakers so that you get an understanding as to what they want to speak about, and you can deliver that in an editorial friendly way that you know is going to benefit the audience. Because there rarely are cases of a sponsor having nothing to say to an audience, because they wouldn't be in that industry if that were the case. So I think ensure that their content is delivered in a way that the audience will appreciate it. Also give them feedback. It's very important that sponsors now supply speakers who are charismatic and who can actually deliver their message in a confident way that will impress the audience. So you must let them know that they have to do that. You must, I mean, small things as well. You must let them, you must vet their presentations if it is a presentation, because you need to do things, tiny things like make sure the font is big enough that people can see it on a virtual platform and that it's not too long, etc., etc. Depending on your strategies around data, you might want to, it depends on the size of your package, but you might want to offer one-on-one introductions as a follow-up that you wouldn't have done before, so you can build a bit of value into that package as well.
Perfect. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. The next one is, do you see any country-to-country differences in their adoption of virtual events? Are some countries warmer to virtual events than others? What's your opinion?
Good question. I've only had, well, we are unfortunate enough that we actually have a presence in China, and we can't get to China to host live events where they are already hosting live events. So from a certain degree, that's hit our access to China, our access to meet people in China. But aside from that, I don't know. I don't see any major differences in Asia? It's a good question. We haven't done any virtual events in Japan since the pandemic because we try and keep the, I suppose, the margins high. So the simultaneous translation there would be need to be looked at. We are looking to do something there in the next maybe 6 months virtually. We've been operating in Korea because we have in-house Korean expertise there, so we don't need the translations. But no, not necessarily. I don't think.
Perfect. I think that that ends the Q&A session, actually. So if there's nothing else, next up we have our Fire Chat discussion panel, consisting of speakers who will be discussing their next moves and what they expect to happen to events over the next few months. First of all, we have Darren Chukri, he's the founder of HK Initiative, Sandy Ip, Partnerships and Events Manager at Tencent Restart, and Wee-Tek Chan, who's the Vice President of Pico, who will be joining Some again, who will be returning to moderate. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand during the Fire Chat and we'll get back to you as well. So first of all, over to the Fire Chat.
All right, so we have a really good sections from Iain, sharing no matter actually on corporate event, festival, and trade shows. And in this panel, actually, it's also very exciting that we're actually having a pretty diverse, very diverse background that we have Darren actually in the marketing society, and Wee-Tek, which is actually from Pico, that they do trade shows and no matter corporate event and festivals. And Sandy from Tencent Restart, that they run community events and also they have the space for others to run events sometimes. So really welcome. And maybe how about we start by having our panel speaker to introduce yourself. So what you're doing, and maybe also share a little bit what type of event you have run for the last year, and so that for our audience to start to know a little bit about our panels. Maybe we start with Darren.
Sure. My name is Darren. I'm the chair of the Marketing Society, and Hong Kong Initiative primarily is helping companies to create a new way to interact and engage with their customers, with their employees, with people around that. And so we've been focused on doing really pushing more virtual interactive experiences where we're using green screen filming, really being able to put them into different worlds and trying to find a way of how do we bring broadcast back together with interactive. While we can't have the in-person, I think content is one of the key areas that we've been overlooking throughout this process. In the last hour, I've heard it come up once or twice. But most importantly, I think it's about how are we recreating this content and then putting it out in these new channels. So for me, with the Business of Design Week, they've taken this time as an example, Knowledge of Design Week, a mental health conference. They all just said we have to rethink, change our mindset of how we were doing as a traditional conference, understand our business objectives, take a hard look at those. What are we trying to accomplish? What are our KPIs? Then we create the virtual hybrid experience or whatever that experience might be. And I think people are really wanting to see interesting content more and more now.
Okay, cool. So how about Wee-Tek?
Hi everyone, my name is Wee-Tek and I lead strategic planning for Pico Group based out of Singapore. So as a lot of people know us, coming from the more traditional aspects of communication, started off as physical, but like everybody else, we've transformed quite drastically over the past, I would say, 5 years, accelerated by last year. So we cover quite a broad aspect of different activations or different modes of activations, right through from exhibitions to trade shows to communication campaigns, as well as working with associations and also having our own IP. So over the past year, we've had to pivot really hard on one aspect for our clients, on the others for ourselves as well, in delivering virtual experiences. And over the last couple of months, we've also experimented a lot with government in terms of jump-starting the trade show scene as well for Singapore, as we know that's extremely important. So, yep, thanks for having me.
Okay, welcome. So how about Sandy?
Hey, thank you, Sam. So my name is Sandy, and I now work at Tencent Research Hong Kong, which is primarily a startup community, and we actually run a physical co-working space in Kwun Tong in Hong Kong. So if you see in my virtual background that we have like physical event space and here, I actually come from a bit more of an interesting mix in terms of background. I actually started on my career in a more sort of traditional events industry where we would help event organizers in building sites for like mega outdoor events such as like Clock and Flap and like the Rugby Sevens sort of thing. So they're unfortunately hugely physical and hugely sort of subsiding in that sense. But over the last couple of years, I've also run events in like hotel venues and event agencies and PR agencies doing like gala dinners sort of things. So they are obviously hugely physical as well. And then at Tencent Research Hong Kong, we run a regional startup community where we hosted a lot of community-driven events, everything from seminars to conferences to networking-based events. So that's basically kind of what I do right now. I oversee the entire community here in Hong Kong and also the events calendar and everything that basically drives the community. And basically over the last year, things changed a lot. We relied on a lot of community efforts in terms of networking and a lot of human interaction where virtual events somewhat don't bring as much as like physical events would do, but obviously we've been adapting and trying to transition in a more hybrid model over the past year.
Okay, cool. So again, welcome all joining. And actually, I want to follow up with what Sandy just shared. So you said actually last year had changed a lot. So the question that will flow to the floor is, so last year, how did you do your event? And so give us a few examples. And actually from now on, like after the pandemic, what's your thoughts that will look like? So for last year and for the future. So maybe we start with Sandy this time.
Sure. Since we actually manage a physical event space, so before the pandemic, everything was basically physical only, where we would have like theater seating, sort of seminars and like networking events. But obviously in the past year, these just kind of are gone. So what we tried over the past year is we've done like webinars over like Zoom. We've done live streams, sort of Fireside Chat over like YouTube and Facebook. We also tried to host very, very small scale, like 10 at most 20 people, sort of little social events in our space. Every format have its sort of pros and cons, obviously, and we've been sort of exploring how it would work because as I was kind of touching on things in the startup community hugely rely on like more sort of the human interaction and the experience, the actual sort of kind of face-to-face experience among the attendees. So obviously, without a physical presence, these are somewhat harder. But as I think Iain also touched on, moving forward, hybrid is really going to be the model because obviously we with the experience hosting virtual events, we obviously see a more diverse sort of attendees pool with regards to their location, the geographical location. So we've been actually welcoming more sort of international speakers, international audience in joining the events. But at the same time, how to maintain a safely physical events is going to be the challenge moving forward at the same time. So, I mean, we've been exploring way into doing like a small scale physical events, which is, either live streamed or in a Zoom sort of setting where we can kind of keep both.
Okay, so basically you'll be having like mainly focusing on hybrid. Basically, that's the new trend that you foresee that.
Yeah, kind of like new normal-ish.
Okay, cool. So how about WeTech?
Okay, so obviously last year we helped a lot of brands jump on the digital or the virtual bandwagon, right? But moving forward, I think we ourselves, for our own IPs that we put out, especially in the music space, I think we really pushed the limit because I think As I think somebody mentioned as part of the question, that there is a lot of fatigue that set in very, very quickly over the past year. So there is a constant need to push the envelope when it comes down to impactful content, engaging, interactives. So we've been pushing that as much as possible, both for clients as well as for ourselves. Now, moving forward, I think for us, because we operate across, in a global manner, we've got a huge network across the globe, and we see a huge variance in terms of the uptake of virtual events, and we still see a lot of intent to actually carry on with physical as much as possible. But I think one of the key considerations for us is really how is that audience of the brands that we work with as well as our audience, what's the comfort level? And I think we need to be mindful to be able to allow access in a manner that they are comfortable with, and hence, the importance of hybrid moving forward.
Okay, so for you, actually, it will be actually for some of the brand might be still do like more on physical, and some of them you explore like the virtual one.
Yes, I think some of the brands towards the end of last year felt that virtual wasn't working as well. And then with the loosening of safe management measures, I think some of them decided to kind of go into a hybrid sooner than others. And I think it's largely dependent on the way that the customers buy, all right, or the way that the consumers kind of prefer to interact. So that's why I think it's in terms of access is really important. The key consideration, access of customers, access of consumers, right? Moving forward when we go about creating these hybrid experiences.
Okay, so later I will come back about like the hybrid experience that you talk about, and so maybe we go to Darren. And so how did you do it last year, and what's your future plan?
You have to.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, you got me there? Okay, great. Yep. I think primarily it's really coming back, starting with the end user. What are they trying to get out of this? And when you go to the hybrids, I think we're starting to see is they don't want to just sit there for hours on end like a traditional conference. How do we engage them? How do we make it more exciting and interactive, where they get to network more? Perhaps the bigger content we put up ahead of time that they've watched. Maybe during the hybrid component of it, we build it in a way that they interact. And I think more and more we're seeing that people just want to interact with other people. It's been very successful. We've done so many where we've actually had a certain event, and then we say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to bring up the audience just to talk with the speakers. That was our high, by far our biggest value that we could offer them, because they were participating now and not just sitting back and watching and listening. And so I think it's really about how do we break it up into tools, treating the online people very, very special. They've come onto this, they're giving us their time, but also realizing that it's going to be on demand. And most of these now are going to be going on demand. Primarily, it wasn't a big issue before, but more and more, I think you had said it, is it's got to be there for 6 months. I pay here. So now I'm not going to sit and wait through all of these. I'll watch that next week or in a couple of weeks. So all of what we have to do is find these interactions between the participants, and especially between the speakers and the other professionals in the room, which I think will really start to make it more fun and exciting.
Interesting. So you mentioned about the interaction and the hybrid. So actually, I would like, because we have different imagination on what hybrid looks like, or actually what the interaction looks like. So after the pandemic, how would you design your events, and what does it mean hybrid for you, like, or your clients, or how would you do it on hybrid? So, or what's actually the perfect way that you imagine with the best?
I think primarily you'd structure it with two pathways, right? So from the get-go, I mean, my thing is a hybrid is not cheaper than a physical event. In fact, a hybrid is more expensive, more labor intensive to really build that. So you really have to do this. But from my perspective, I think that you're creating content As an example, if I'm going to speak over here, then come off to a side room with the virtual audience, now interact, engage specifically with them, or network over there. And no longer as a speaker am I just going to go for that 15-minute TED speak. I'm going to be there to interact in multiple platforms, step into a virtual room, meet with audiences here. And more, I think we're going to see this type of interaction that we can blend. And speakers are not going to be able to come. So I think there's going to be a mix. What's wrong with sitting in a room with 2 speakers and one person is in London or in New York, especially now? So the audience, you still feel you're engaging, interacting, but it's a hybrid, right? One of the speakers is there. And at Business to Design Week, we had at least 2 speakers in the audience and 1 or 2 calling in virtually. And that was a very nice mix as well, that I think makes it look a little bit more broader. And it's just how you set that up in a technical way that makes a difference now.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's actually exactly what we're doing and why WeTech actually can join us from Singapore today. So how about others? How will you imagine the hybrid events?
I think for us, it's not just about creating a digital double, right, of the experience. So, for example, if you have an entertainment physical experience that's being conducted, and obviously, there will be a restriction in the number of physical attendees, right? But you want to kind of amplify that. However, in terms of look and feel, it might be similar. However, in terms of the behavior of that audience online needs to be taken into key consideration. What are they thinking? What's top of mind? We need to anticipate a lot more with regards to what might be of interest. So I think it's really, as Darren mentioned, I think it all comes down to understanding that audience or that community that we're serving, right? Or that experience is created for, or for that matter, in terms of how they go about in terms of buying, all right, buying that proposition that you're putting out. So it's really about an intersect of the physical and the digital, but coming from an experiential perspective. How does it all come together? How is it congruent with the consumer and the audience in terms of how they go about looking for that information and consuming that content?
Okay. So how about Sandy?
It was an interesting point that you raised. It was like, how do we define virtual events? How do we define hybrid events? Because I think there's no formula for any sort of perfect event. Obviously, as secondary was saying, it really depends on the audience that we are targeting. It also really depends on the speakers. We have actually done events where it was actually quite recent. We was halfly physical, where some of the speakers are joining online, where it was we actually had we can have like a huge screen that comes down on the stage, where it was like a live broadcast sort of panel discussion where the speakers are virtual versus while the attendees are physically in their space. So I mean, as long as the interaction is there, the engagement is there between the audience and the speakers, I think as long as that works for both sides, there's a perfect event. And obviously, hybrid events, yes, is a lot more costly in that sense, in the technical sense. I mean, but at the same time, is how we maintain that engagement between the audience and the speakers. And as Darren was saying, as a speaker, if I'm attending a hybrid event where part of the audience is online and in the virtual space, how do we engage them at the same time so that either side of the audience don't feel sort of left out while the speakers is interacting with the other sort of side. So I mean, I think we've been exploring ways to balance that, so to speak. But how do we keep sort of the audience engaged is always the ultimate key questions, especially with more the business side, the business events, more like trade events kind of thing.
Okay, so I think all basically, from what I heard, actually all of us kind of basically try or did some kind of hybrid or virtual event before. So maybe to share your experience so that for the audience, they can learn from it, who haven't done it before or never done it before, planning to do it or maybe do it in the future. So what actually really works? Like maybe pick one or two examples that you have done for virtual or hybrid, and what actually is your biggest learning that, okay, like avoid it, don't do it. So what's something that you can share? It seems, Sandy, you have some memory already.
Yeah, what to avoid. We've done entirely virtual events, as we were saying. For us and for clients, they don't work as well as we would hope that would do. The interactions is somewhat missing if it's entirely virtual. We've done events where we would do live streams and stuff over Facebook or Zoom. The audience just quiet, and because you don't see them, you can't really tell what they're thinking. You can't tell what sort of emotions that we are evoking with the presentations and whatnot. So well, I guess as I was saying earlier, hybrid is really the way forward. And also one thing that we really try to avoid is jamming too many content in a virtual / hybrid settings. Things like there is a big fatigue, especially when people are watching something over screens. We've tried it one time with an event that was almost 2 hours, but it was really just speakers sort of sharings, which was almost common with physical events where have people on the stage with like 4 speakers, each of them have like a 30-minute sharing. That's kind of 2 hours, but people just kind of the attention span just doesn't work over the virtual sense.
Okay.
So yeah.
Is there anything that you tried that worked really well?
We have actually done we actually done a launch event in the space here 2 weeks ago, a week ago. We watched some of the speakers were online. Most of the attendees were physical. Where we would this is actually one of the first more physical events that we've hosted in an entire year, actually, where we would say there is the content is well delivered, and at the same time, some of the human interaction is maintained, where we would have a bit of a networking afterwards, where there's still that sort of exchange of ideas here and there. At the same time, actually one of the, I think the benefits of hosting virtual events is we now have a much wider pool for speakers that would deliver quality content and at the same time engaging content for the audience. So that was quite an interesting, because usually when we think about hybrid events is where most of the speakers are physical while some audience are online. But that time it was kind of, even the speakers were hybrid in their physical presence, and that actually worked quite well for us.
Okay, that's actually interesting. Actually, reverse all the speakers are virtual and the audience actually is physical. And it seems that it worked pretty well, right?
It did.
Oh, interesting. So how about to other speakers? Anything that worked really well and anything to avoid?
I think from our side, one of the best things that we did was take the extra amount of time to work with the speakers in their presentations and creating, many times we would almost create a 12-minute video edited segmented piece so we can get it very powerful, get it down to almost less than a TED Talk time, and then leave more time for the interaction and engagement with that. And I think more and more we're seeing, we have hundreds of channels to choose from. And to me, what was really most fascinating was, we had hundreds of thousands of people watching and coming to watch the videos. But when you really look at the data, you're going to say, they were dropping off after 5 minutes, or they weren't staying here for the whole time. And when you really start to analyze that, then you really start to unpack what's going wrong. And basically, it's that you have to really train them. I think Iain said the same thing. He says, you know, you have to train them like a TEDx. You have to put so much energy and effort into them delivering this, especially whether it's in a virtual, at home. Am I looking off? You know, so many times we go through speaker training, just how to do it in front of the camera. Like, you can't look here, right? If you're looking here, you're boring the audience. And there's so much training and education that's really important that you have to do. That working it, but it's thinking, how do I bring it back to that broadcast content? I think is very powerful.
Cool. Anything to avoid, or you try that? No, you recommend don't do it.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed was breakout, almost kind of like breakout master classes, where we had talks, we had discussions, then we take people into groups, and being able to do that both in a hybrid as well. So we had people in a real group breakout, and they could also participate virtually on this. And the breakout master classes seemed to be very interesting, because this is why we had an overarching topic, but when we got down to it, we were able to really come in and have a conversation that we wanted to have with that master, with that speaker, with that person. And it's an important thing, I think, to bring it back. That was the networking where you used to bump into people at the site. Oh, here's my card, right? I'm excited by this. Even a couple minute, a little chat makes all the difference. And I think you have to find a way to do that in the hybrid and virtual world.
Okay, that's a good recommendation. So actually, maybe next time we can do it. So for all the event marketers, and they can exchange their thoughts individually. So that's actually a very, very good suggestions. So how about VTech? Anything that you try works really well?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the key takeaways in the earlier experiences that we created online was that at that point in time, a lot of people were really into the immersive spaces, right? Where you have multiple spaces. There was a discussion on whether it is a free for all or a curated experience. I think from the data and the insights that we pull from the experiences that we launched, I think a curated experience, meaning a timed release of the spaces that we've created virtually, very often work a lot better in focusing the attention of the audience, right, with regards to the content that's being put out. Otherwise, one of the conferences that we delivered for a client, we noticed there was a huge kind of like a waveform, right, where people came in, they dropped out, they came in, and they dropped out again, because I think they were quite, and then we saw spikes in terms of the touch points in the other spaces that we created. So there is a risk of distraction, right, from the main event or the main content that's being put out, especially when you have multi-tiered or multiple experiences spaces within that virtual event. The other thing that we felt worked well, that was more from a B2C perspective, was when we kind of put out a music festival. It was not so much, we had to really push the limit because the other players were really out there. And we tried to kind of recreate, or at least in meaning, the experience, right? So for example, when you go to a music festival, you do not, and you do not just, you're not there alone, right? You want to experience it with your friends. So enabling people to do that virtually, albeit via avatars, was very welcome. And the other thing is in terms of customization. I think enabling attendees to customize their presence in that digital space is also very much a welcoming fact, especially when there's a fair amount of fatigue, right, that a lot of people are experiencing. So making it fun, making it engaging.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I think actually we have a little bit time left for the audience to ask questions for the panel. And because there was I think there was some question actually unanswered earlier sections. Actually, I brought it here. I think the first one actually will be asking the diverse background from our panel is, so how do you think the virtual event will stick around after the pandemic? So do you guys think it will stay, or it will go back to totally physical? So I think that's the first question I saw, and we haven't discussed yet. So what's your point of view on that?
Well, I think with what we're seeing from the different markets that we operate in, I think virtual events will stay. However, I think we also observe a very strong intent of going back into physical. So it's really about mitigating the risk, right, of a real infection. So we see virtual events staying. However, I think it's really about pushing forth with a strong hybrid proposition, so that and contingency planning, so that we're able to toggle between the two relatively quickly.
Okay. How about others?
I think an interesting point that I'm seeing is that we had the idea that an event was 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And I believe that that's being thrown out the window. That you're creating this event that's going to be longer term, with on demand, with interactions, with content. Then the physical happenings will happen within that. But I think the perfect example is like Business of Design Week, right? It was a week long of events, but we're now moving them towards, let's create a platform that connects designers from around the world on an ongoing basis, having things happening on a monthly basis, as well as the big scale events, so that we slowly are able to build it over time, let them interact, engage more. Because remember, we're trying to bring people together. And I think this idea that we have to only do it in a very short setting is an outdated term. And yes, we could still have that concert or whatever, but more and more we're going to realize that there's huge value of opening it up to a global audience and not just having, even if it is a local, there's still great ways to tap into that global virtual component.
Cool. So how about Sandy? Do you think that it will stick around?
I think actually some events cannot be virtual, so to speak. Like a sports events or like music festivals, they cannot really be virtual in a sense, especially so for I'll just take a very simple example. The Hong Kong Rugby Sevens, if it's entirely virtual, it's not the Sevens. I think a core component of the event is always the interaction between the audience and whoever, and the sort of delivering content, be it a sports event, be it a seminar, sort of like a speaker sort of settings. But at that sort of perspective, these will have to come back entirely physical. I mean, they can be somewhat virtual, where it's probably live streamed and whatnot. But for instance, sports events are always live streamed. Like we were watching the English Premier League in Hong Kong over TV. They're always live streamed, and so that's not very virtual in that sense. But then with that said, I mean, some events can stay virtual. Business events can be. Darren also raised a very interesting point with the BODW, where the engagement among attendees and the speakers are actually extended. So that would stick around. That would definitely stick around. I mean, even if we started having physical conferences, I think having a virtual networking platforms would still thrive.
Cool.
Just one quick note on that. I'd love to challenge that, because as we say, within that local crowd that's going to, as an example, in the US right now, these virtual concerts where you're being able to, or sporting event. Let's say I'm able to watch it now with a group of my 10 friends, all on screen while we're here, interacting. Oh, I get control over different camera angles perhaps now of what's looking at that sporting event. So I think that the hybrid experience can be done in different ways. In music concerts, we're seeing all sorts of interactions in the green room area with the artists people over here, and this is the types of things that they get to see. So for me, I think it's just kind of, how do we think about it differently? Because it's add a few little things and you have a hybrid, even though there's a big physical, but you still have a hybrid opportunity.
Yes, that's actually very, very true. I mean, having a hybrid experience, but I don't know, I didn't imagine. I will put it that way. Almost kind of missing the time where you are among a crowd of thousands of people at a sport event or music festival. That experience is kind of incomparable. But yes, I agree. I mean, it can be somewhat virtual, somewhat hybrid?
We actually see a few new company coming up. One is called Wave. So they are actually a VR concert company that the artist is actually wearing a clothes, and then like you really do live streaming concerts, and then they have like avatar on the virtual world. So we see something new is coming up, which is actually pretty different from just live streaming. So it's like a virtual avatar, and I think that's for the audience.
Also, some interesting. My friends, they're doing this in the States. But they're doing a 360 right point of view. So where it's not just watching it, you can jump around from the drummer perspective, from this perspective. So you're able to with hi-fi sound and streaming now jump and interact and experience something in no way that you would even be able to do in the physical point, being stuck way up far and away. And I think these are the exciting technologies that are really happening, where it says, look what I can jump in that close and see it. Even if I'm at the concert, great, I want to get a replay on another time in that 360 virtual experience.
Yeah, so I think actually we still look forward to how it will looks like. And I just saw someone just like last minute they throw out. So I don't know whether you want a quick maybe 2 seconds answer or 2-sentence answer. So and then we can wrap it up. So I think that the question is like, how would you foresee the cost impact for both physical and virtual shows? Like it's like increase, decrease. So let's do a quick poll. So what do you think? Physical and virtual, the cost of it, increase, decrease? Maybe do a quick round here.
I think from our experience, we see if for the cost of physical experiences going up. I mean, primarily because of the safe management measures, right? And the repeated rounds of tests that you have to do, right? So all that bumps up the costs.
How about virtual?
Virtual will get probably, I would look at it at different levels, right? So the webinars will probably get cheaper and cheaper. However, I think a premium will kick in if we're able to find a breakthrough in terms of engagement, right? I think technology will become more prevalent and cheaper, and hence the limit is really in understanding what consumers want and being able to kind of put it out in a impactful manner.
Okay. How about Darren and Sandy?
I actually think costs are going to go up for either format. I mean, for physical events, as we were saying earlier, if we have more sort of safety measures with regards to registration, with regards to health declaration, with regards to temperature check, yada yada, that would goes up. But that on the virtual side, as I want to say, technology is going to be the king of moving forward for every industries. And we starting having like holographic displays, holographic sort of engagement with the audience, that would definitely drive up the bill. But at the same time, as we were saying, more sort of the standard sort of webinars, conferences, those kind of prices is going to come down. But once we start kicking in the engagement levels, that will drive up the cost. Right.
Darren, your turn.
I think that it's collectively costs haven't changed; they're just going up. But it's about an ROI of how many people, and I think that's the difference. When I used to do a local event and have 2,000 people, well, what's my ROI on that? Versus now, I can look at it across. Oh, maybe I reached 10,000, like Tony Robbins did, as we talked about earlier, right? So if we can't expand the audience, then we can do. I think overall, people are saying, I'm not like in China saying they don't want to pay for a content online. That's that's not that part of it. Other parts of the world are maybe charging 60%, but it all depends on what value that they get out of it. So I think people are willing to pay a right price as long as they get the right value out of it, and the data will slowly tell us what's exciting, what's not. And I think, like Tony Robbins, they're making a completely different business model now around their business, and all of us should be looking at a different business model with these new technologies.
Yeah, I think as a provider, like I can definitely tell, like the technology will be more and more common, And so I foresee actually virtual event, even for our product, we will have a lower and much more affordable tiers for people. Actually, anyone can do events. Kind of like I call it the Uber of events. So anyone actually with like a little bit knowledge on like networks, then anyone can actually become a taxi driver and become an event organizers. But actually, as I think some of the speakers said, with some premium and special engagement element, then there will be some additional cost there, which is actually creating unique experience for virtual events. That's what I think in the virtual event space. And physical event, we don't run too many physical events, so I couldn't comment that. But I really hope today our audience get some insight from the panel sharing, that actually I think there's a lot of different perspective that is really insightful. And so thank you again for sharing all your experience and also your ideas to the audience. And thank you for joining for the audience. And so I think we will have regular events like this to keep you updated about the trend, what's going on, and hope to bring you to the latest and the best speaker in the world that just like today. So thank you everyone for joining, and I will see you all next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.